if I told you that the deadliest flood in American history was caused by a desert? Or that the U.S. once had a war fought by birds against farmers? And what if I told you the president once led an army against his own citizens? You're about to discover some of the weirdest, wildest, and downright bizarre events in American history that most people have never heard of. Buckle up, because these stories are stranger than fiction. Hey folks, welcome back to Factual America, where we dig deep into the stories that make the U.S. the unique place it is today. In this video, we're diving headfirst into some of the most bizarre American historical events that rarely make it into the textbooks. I'm not talking about your typical Revolutionary or Civil War stories. These are the jaw-dropping, head-scratching events you probably didn't learn in school. So stick with me, and I promise you'll be hooked till the very end. Let's kick things off with a tale so odd you might think I made it up. Picture this: the Great Boston Molasses Flood of 1919. That's right, molasses, the thick, sweet syrup, turned deadly. On a cold January day, a giant storage tank burst, sending a 15-foot wave of molasses barreling through the streets of Boston at 35 miles per hour. Picture people being swept off their feet, horses getting stuck, and entire buildings ripped from their foundations, all by a flood of sticky goo. In total, 21 people died and over 150 were injured. To this day, some locals say you can still smell molasses on a hot summer day in that part of Boston. It's a dark, syrupy chapter in American history. But if you thought that was odd, wait until you hear about the time the United States military took on a flock of birds. I'm talking about the Great MU War of 1932. You might think I'm talking about Australia, but nope. Well, okay. Technically, this one happened in Australia, but here's why it fits. American newspapers ran wild with the story, sparking debate about waging war on nuisance animals in the U.S., leading to some truly strange copycat events in our own country. In the 1930s, some states actually declared wars on flocks of crows, starlings, and sparrows that were devastating crops. Imagine groups of armed farmers taken to the fields with shotguns, sometimes even with bounties paid by the local government, to battle birds for their harvests. Spoiler alert, the birds usually won. Now, moving from animals to astronauts, have you ever heard of the Great Moon Hoax of 1835? Long before fake news dominated our headlines, a New York newspaper published a series of articles claiming that astronomers had discovered life and even civilization on the moon. The stories were complete fabrications. Think moon-dwelling unicorns, bipedal beavers, and bat-winged humanoids. Readers ate it up, and the story became one of America's first viral hoaxes. It's a good reminder. Sensational headlines have been fooling Americans for nearly 200 years. All right, let's talk about the only time in American history when a sitting president actually led troops into battle against his own citizens. I'm talking about the Whiskey Rebellion of 1794. After the Revolutionary War, George Washington, yep, the guy on the $1 bill, mounted his horse, donned his uniform, and led an army of nearly 13,000 men to western Pennsylvania to put down a violent protest over whiskey taxes. The rebels? They were mostly poor farmers who used whiskey as a kind of currency. Washington's show of force worked. The rebellion fizzled fast, but it remains the first and only time a U.S. president personally commanded troops in the field. Here's another head-scratcher: the mysterious New York Harbor Island swindle. In the mid-1800s, a crafty con artist by the name of William Bill the Butcher Poole tricked dozens of city dwellers into buying non-existent land in New York Harbor. He sold fake deeds to underwater lots, promising that buyers could build their dream homes right there on the mudflats. People ponied up huge sums only to discover they were now proud owners of a piece of the Atlantic Ocean. Real estate scams, it turns out, are nothing new. Speaking of real estate, have you ever wondered why there's a tiny piece of land belonging to Minnesota called the Northwest Angle trapped up in Canada? Blame a bizarre map-drawing mistake after the Revolutionary War. Negotiators misread maps and accidentally created a weird, tooth-shaped chunk of American territory that's surrounded on all sides by Canada and Lake of the Woods. The only way to drive there from the U.S.? Either take a boat in the summer or drive through Canada and re-enter the U.S. at the angle. Even Border Patrol sometimes gets confused. Now, I know what you're thinking. Sure, but could history get any stranger? How about the 1948 incident when the U.S. Air Force dropped candy, yes, candy, over Berlin? Picture this. The Soviet blockade was starving West Berlin after WFRs, and American pilots flying in supplies started tying little parachutes to chocolate bars and dropping them for the city's children below. It became known as the Berlin Candy Bombing, and it won America serious goodwill during a tense time in the Cold War. Let's jet back to the good old USA for one more. Did you know the U.S. once proposed building a massive nuclear-powered ice aircraft carrier during World War II? Project Habakkuk was the plan to build a floating aircraft runway out of Pykrete, that's ice and wood pulp, as an unsinkable base in the Atlantic. They even made a model on a Canadian lake. By the time engineers figured out how impractical a giant ice ship really was, the war had moved on. But for a hot second, the U.S. was seriously considering fighting Nazis from a frozen fortress. Now, let's have a little fun. If you're enjoying these oddball slices of American history, smash that like button and hit subscribe so you won't miss any more offbeat stories. And here's a question for you. What's the strangest historical fact about America you've ever heard? Drop it in the comments. I love reading your wildest discoveries, and who knows, your suggestion might end up in our next video. All right, folks, the stories we tell shape the nation we live in. Whether it's molasses floods, land-grabbing con men, or presidents on horseback, American history is way weirder and way more fascinating than we often give it credit for. Thanks for watching Factual America. Until next time, keep asking questions and keep uncovering the strange, true stories that make this country so unforgettable. See you in the next one.